It's been a long time coming, but this time last week, the Volkswagen ID3 finally got its official reveal at the Frankfurt Motor Show. It's the car that Volkswagen hopes will begin its transition away from its past, a past that includes the Dieselgate debacle, and towards a more greener, significantly rosier one. And if you listen to what Volkswagen has been saying for the past few years, it's also the car that the company hopes will propel it into the electric vehicle marketplace, not just as a participant, but as a leader. It's up to you whether you believe them or not. But will it? And what's the ID3 going to be like? And what do we need to understand about Volkswagen and its electric vehicles from this point onwards? And what does the ID3 promise to offer regular car buyers for whom a more expensive or larger electric vehicle is just out of the question? Before I get to this video, let's just acknowledge something. This is not a car that cross-shops against a single Tesla in any way, shape or form. I've done a whole video on the pitfalls of comparing every EV to Teslas, so I'm not going to rehash it here. If you listen to Volkswagen's aspirations for the ID3, it wants it to be as influential and revolutionary as the original Volkswagen Beetle and Volkswagen Golf were. It wants it to be a new type of small, efficient vehicle that has mass market appeal and will be sold to a wide cross-section of the community in its target markets in Europe. From outside, the ID3's design language could certainly help Volkswagen achieve that. Unlike some electric vehicles, the ID3 is not obviously a plug-in car. In fact, its design is quite in keeping with Volkswagen's design language, rather than screaming its eco-credentials from the treetops. Sitting higher than Volkswagen's Golf, it has a shorter nose and a longer wheelbase. And while there's not much external difference between the two cars' length, the inside of the ID3 is much bigger than the Golf's. Most noticeably, the rear seat area, where reviewers say there's room to cross your legs. This has all been made possible thanks to the Meb platform on which the ID3 is based. It's the first of Volkswagen's electric models to use the Meb platform, but won't be the last. And Volkswagen is going to sell the Meb platform to Ford. That platform packages everything needed for the electric drivetrain below the cabin, including the motor and battery pack, in a skateboard design that has long been the norm for any self-respecting electric vehicle in the market. So it's not exactly revolutionary in that context. But unlike most small electric hatchbacks on the market, Volkswagen has opted to make the ID3 a rear-wheel drive car, like the BMW i3, with a 150 kilowatt electric motor tucked under the rear load bay floor on the rear axle. For an electric car, that actually makes sense, as it's far less complicated to make a rear-wheel drive electric car than a front-wheel drive one, because you don't have to worry about steering the driven axle. The Meb platform, as found in the ID3, will be offered eventually with 3 different variants, which will pair up with various trim levels. At launch, only a 58 kilowatt-hour battery pack will be offered and be capable of providing up to 420 kilometers on the WLTP test cycle. A little later, Volkswagen will launch a 45 kilowatt-hour battery pack variant, which will offer 330 kilometers of range on the WLTP test cycle, and eventually a 77 kilowatt-hour variant will be offered with a 550 kilometer range on the WLTP test cycle. Top speed for all variants will be electronically limited to 160 kilometers per hour. I'll come to some of the details later in terms of specs, but let's take a look inside the cabin, which looks a lot less futuristic than I think some had worried, and a lot less quirky than some other electric cars out there. But it's surprisingly minimalistic. And there's also plenty to indicate that Volkswagen had been looking at other cars on the market when designing the interior. Aside from the obvious cabin space and large front window that should give great visibility, the cockpit itself reminds me a lot of other plug-in cars that you can buy today. The design of the dashboard and the trim panels remind me quite a lot of the Chevrolet Bolt EV, a car I know pretty well because it's my daily driver. The dashboard in front of the driver reminds me of the i3's cockpit. So too does the gear selector, which looks like it's actually just been lifted straight out of the BMW i3. The steering wheel, meanwhile, is classic Volkswagen, with a flattened out bottom that you'll find in pretty much every other Volkswagen on sale today. Add in the touchscreen center console, which sits proud of the dash, and you're left with a very modern yet functional interior that will appeal to some and not to others. Volkswagen says only the electric window and hazard warning lights are activated by physical tactile buttons, and says everything else is activated using touch-sensitive buttons or on-screen adjustments. That might appeal to some who like a more minimalist interior, but as I've learned in the automotive world, not everyone likes that. I personally like minimalist interiors, but I've met plenty of people who prefer old-fashioned switches. And while touch-sensitive switches, while done correctly, are fantastic, I've still got really bad memories of the capacitive touchscreen switches as found in the original Chevrolet and Holden Volts, or if you prefer, in Europe, the Opel Ampera. Depending on the variant you get, there are also some additional tech features that you'll get with your ID3. But all of the models come with a voice-activated assistant as standard, with something called an ID light, which tells driver or passenger which person the car is interacting with. The words "Hello ID" are the wake words, and for this I just hope it's better than the other digital assistants that have come before, because honestly, I've yet to find one that works well in any car. While Volkswagen will eventually sell the ID3 with those different battery pack sizes I previously mentioned, the launch version of the ID3 First, will go on sale next year in Europe in 3 different trim variants: the ID3 First, ID3 First Plus, and ID3 First Max. Each will come with 100 kilowatt CCS quick charging, and all ID3 First Edition customers, including First Plus and First Max customers, will get 2,000 kilowatt hours of free quick charging with their car. While the entry-level ID3 will eventually come in at under €30,000, the ID3 First Editions will cost a little more than that. ID3 First Plus customers will get a 19 instead of 18-inch set of alloy wheels, as well as adaptive cruise control and keyless entry over the base, as well as some extra styling elements and extra USB-C charging. Volkswagen, I should note, is also pledging to make every ID3 carbon neutrally, meaning it's going to offset any carbon released during the manufacture of the car or its components, and it's also going to use renewable electricity to power the vehicle production lines. At the high end, the ID3 First Max will add 20-inch wheels, emergency assist, lane keep assist, and a large panoramic tilt and slide sunroof. There's also a Beat sound system and what it's calling an augmented reality heads-up display. At this high end, the model will likely cost far more than the entry-level ID3's headline sub €30,000 price tag, but that's hardly a surprise. When Volkswagen launches its other battery variants of the ID3, the 77 kWh variant will get a 125 kilowatt CCS quick charging capability, faster than the other 2 variants. It will refill then a little faster than the smaller capacity models. Why do those smaller range ones charge more slowly? Well, that's simple: the limitations of the battery chemistry. So what do we have here? Well, the ID3 looks to do exactly what Volkswagen says it will: offer a low entry-level price point to electric vehicles while offering decent range and features, as well as higher-end, higher-price variants. If the ID3 proves reliable, and Volkswagen can make enough of them, I think it's certainly got a chance at going after other electric vehicles of a similar market and price point. And like I said earlier, that doesn't include Tesla. It does include cars like the very limited production Opel Ampera E, the upcoming Opel e-Corsa and Peugeot e-208, the recently released Renault Zoe 50 and Nissan Leaf E+. We already know that Volkswagen makes cars that drive and handle really well and is particularly good with its hatchbacks. But that's not really the question right now. The question is volume. And there's the interesting thing. Critics are saying that Volkswagen should already be starting sales and deliveries now, not next year. I mean, Volkswagen is due to start making production ID3s in November. But Volkswagen says it's not going to actually sell any until next year. It wants to stock up a volume of ID3s before it starts shipping them to customers. And I think that suggests it doesn't want to have the limited production, limited availability issues that some other European market cars have had of late. If it can meet its launch target and make the ID3 as easy to get hold of as any internal combustion engine car, well then that's certainly something which would cause massive waves in the plug-in vehicle world. After that, Volkswagen would have to keep up production and replicate the ID3's production processes elsewhere, like bringing the ID4 to market that it's promising North America. That's it. Thanks for joining me, and see you next time.